The little girl is playing outside when suddenly her ears catch the scream of the kids trapped inside the burning house. The distant shouts quickly turn into desperate, frantic cries. Todd crawls outside screaming. The little girl runs to her house and calls out for her mother. She tells her that there's a fire outside. The mother rushes outside. Todd tells her to call the fire department. She immediately calls the fire department. The woman nervously answers questions on the phone while watching the house burn.
Yeah, it's my neighbor's.
She indicates that there are babies inside the house and gives out the address they're at. Todd pushes his car out of the way so it doesn't get destroyed. Todd breaks one of the windows, but fire breaks out, resulting in an explosion. The fire continues to break out through the doors, making it impossible for Todd to get inside to save his kids. Todd starts crying and praying for his kids, knowing it is too late to save them now. The house was in ruins and his daughters were gone. This is where the tragedy begins, but also where society fails him for the first time. It's the moment grief becomes suspicion and love becomes a crime. As Todd stood outside, watching his world collapse, neighbors whispered and authorities took note of his reactions. Reactions that would later be used against him. The police investigators gather information, examining the scene, interviewing witnesses, and analyzing what little evidence remains after the incident. As they piece together their findings, they formulate their own hypothesis on how the fire might have started. Both investigators become increasingly convinced that Todd is responsible, believing he deliberately set the fire while the children were asleep, ensuring they had no chance to escape. Todd and his wife Stacy are down at the police station being questioned by the investigators.
Anything unusual happen?
They ask him all sorts of questions ranging from the night before the fire to questions about past disturbances in their relationship. Todd has been in a lot of trouble before, so they are suspicious of him. Todd tells them everything that happened that day, but the investigators don't seem convinced. Todd wasn't perfect. He had a temper and his relationship with Sherry was filled with arguments. But he loved his children deeply.
Because you don't have a fucking job, that's why.
That love, however, would soon be overshadowed by tragedy, suspicion, and a system that was all too quick to judge.
Then I realized I could hear Amber screaming, "Daddy, Daddy."
After their children's funeral, Todd and Stacy get into a heated argument while heading home.
I'm hurting too, baby.
Did you hear a word I said?
Eventually, they get pulled over by the police and Todd gets arrested for the murder of his 3 daughters. What should have been a period of mourning quickly turned into an interrogation. Investigators combed through the wreckage and concluded that the fire was no accident. It was arson. The burn marks, the patterns in the debris, the way the flames had spread, it all pointed to an accelerant, they claim. And there was only one person to blame, Todd. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, he was arrested and charged with the murder of his own children. His grief and disbelief were dismissed as a trick, and suddenly he is no longer seen as a grieving father, but as a cold-blooded killer. Todd is still in disbelief about what's happening, unable to comprehend how his life has spiraled into this nightmare. Frustration and fear build inside him, and tensions eventually boil over when he gets into a heated argument with his cellmate. Meanwhile, his lawyers deliver a harsh reality check, advising him to plead guilty in exchange for a life sentence. But Todd refuses, standing firm in his innocence, unwilling to admit to a crime he didn't commit.
They better start digging my grave now, because I'll die before I say I killed my own kid.
His lawyer, however, is growing impatient, seeing no way to win the case. He refuses to put Todd on the stand, convinced that his temper and defiance will do more harm than good, and continues to insist that taking a guilty plea is his only chance of survival. Todd's trial goes swift and unforgiving. The prosecution paints him as a violent, short-tempered man who had set his own house on fire in a fit of rage.
This was no arson. This was murder.
The prosecutor presents to the jury the pictures of the 3 little girls who died in the fire. Their neighbor, who called the fire department, testifies against Todd, saying he didn't try to save the kids.
He didn't try to save those kids till the cops showed up.
The prosecution presents forensic experts who claim the fire was intentionally set. They highlight burn marks and melted flooring as evidence of accelerants.
In the shape of a pentagram, the symbol of the devil.
Todd's defense is weak, unable to counter the prosecution's claims effectively. His lawyer fails to mount a strong defense. A fellow inmate testifies that Willingham confessed to setting the fire. This testimony, despite its questionable reliability, becomes a key factor in his conviction.
He decided that he was going to cover it up by starting a fire.
Hell no.
Todd's defense is weak, unable to counter the flawed fire science being presented. The jury took little time to reach a verdict: guilty.
Will the defendant rise?
Just like in Just Mercy 2019, we see how flawed forensic testimony and racial social bias can decide someone's life in minutes. The courtroom didn't want truth. It wanted closure. Willingham is found guilty of murder and sentenced to death.
You are sentenced to death.
He reacts with anger and disbelief while Stacy struggles with her doubts about his innocence. Todd is moved to a high-security prison to serve his days until he finally gets his penalty. Everyone around him, including the prisoners and the guards, is convinced he is guilty. Todd's time in prison grows even more brutal when tensions with other inmates escalate into a violent altercation. A heated argument turns physical, and Todd, outnumbered, is beaten before guards intervene. Each beating leaves him more broken, his body aching, his spirit wavering. With no one to turn to and no way to fight back, Todd is left alone with his thoughts, his anger, and the overwhelming fear that he may never leave prison alive. Willingham spends years in a solitary prison cell, growing more frustrated and hopeless. He writes letters to the outside world proclaiming his innocence and describing his life behind bars. He also writes letters to his wife Stacy, who hasn't come to visit him after his imprisonment.
It already feels like so long ago.
Stacy reads his letter and decides to write a letter to the governor about Todd's innocence, but she gets into a fight with her grandmother because of it. Todd continues writing to Stacy, holding on to something real in a world that now feels cold and unforgiving. But in between those descriptions, he also reminisces about the life they once shared, the moments of love and laughter that now seem so distant. Writing becomes his only escape, his only way to feel connected to the outside world. One day while in the prison yard, a fellow inmate pulls him aside and offers a slight bit of hope. The prisoner tells Todd that he can reach out to Texas Equal Justice, an organization that helps those who have been wrongfully convicted. If he writes to them and explains his situation, they might be able to assign him a lawyer who can fight for his appeal.
You saying I can get me a new lawyer with no money?
Yeah, boy.
He returns to his cell that night, determined to write yet another letter. A new lawyer is assigned to him, and he provides him with books that might be helpful to him and asks if he has any other assistance that might help them in the process. Todd tells him there isn't anybody that's willing to help him. In prison, Todd and the other prisoners wait for their dates while bidding farewell to the prisoners who have received their penalty dates.
Let's go, brother. Yes, you can, Ron. Yes, you can. Yes, you can, brother.
7 years go by, and Elizabeth, a single mother with a strong sense of justice, reads about Todd's case and decides to write to him back. Todd writes letters to Elizabeth, walking her through his days in prison and his frustration while staying there. He adds her to the visitor list so that she can come and visit him one day. Elizabeth finally decides to pay him a visit and discuss how she can help him. Elizabeth and Todd have a very good first impression.
Thank you for coming, Mrs. Gilbert. Really nice to meet you.
And Elizabeth leaves determined to help him. Todd begins to open up, showing a side of himself no one else sees. Through Elizabeth, Todd found a voice, someone who believed in his innocence when the world had already condemned him. And through Todd, Elizabeth found a cause that would consume her life, a fight to prove that justice had failed. Elizabeth faces her only difficulties at home because of the death of her ex-husband, who is the father of her 2 children. Todd keeps sending her letters and updating her about his life. He seems to be learning a lot during his stay there.
I guess after all this time, the hate just kind of burned out of me.
Elizabeth starts visiting Todd more frequently, and with each visit, their conversations grow deeper and more personal. Much like in Dead Man Walking, this unlikely bond becomes more than just legal help. It becomes a spiritual redemption. They open up about their pasts, their regrets, and the pain they both carry. They talk about their lost spouses, Elizabeth's divorce, and Todd's fractured marriage. They share stories about their children, the joys and the struggles of parenthood, and the ache of being separated from them. Through their conversations, Elizabeth starts to see Todd not as the man the world has condemned, but as someone who has been left behind by a system that will never give him a chance. Todd tries to build a healthy relationship with the prison guards and even shares some of the wisdom he picked up from the books he reads. To live is to suffer, and to survive, you have to find meaning in the suffering. He mentions that he made a promise to his daughter and that she often visits him in his mind.
To live is to suffer.
He maintains a peaceful interaction with the prison guard and even shares personal information like the guard's daughter's name. Todd keeps on having imaginary interactions with his eldest daughter, moments that bring him both comfort and pain as he struggles to cope with his isolation. Sometimes he imagines having full conversations with her. Through letters and prison visits, Elizabeth and Todd develop a deep bond. She encourages him to keep fighting for justice, and he finds comfort in their unlikely friendship.
Sometimes that hour between 6 and 7 in the morning.
Determined to prove Todd's innocence, Elizabeth contacts fire experts and legal advocates, uncovering evidence that the original investigation was flawed.
Mr. Horton?
No questions, Your Honor.
She contacts attorneys and journalists to get Todd's case reviewed. Elizabeth confronts Todd's cellmate. She lays out the facts, making it clear that she knows he lied and that his testimony played a crucial role in Todd's wrongful conviction. She urges him to do the right thing, to come forward and admit the truth so that Todd might have a chance at freedom.
You felt like you knew Todd well at all, or?
Elizabeth tells him about the new findings she has uncovered, evidence that challenges the original testimonies that clearly show it is fabricated and could finally prove his innocence. Her voice is filled with hope.
I think the DA paid somebody to pay him off.
He took a bribe.
Todd does not share her enthusiasm. He reminds her that he has already used 5 of his appeals, each one ending in disappointment, each one bringing him closer to the end of the road. Elizabeth sees the doubt in his eyes, but she refuses to back down. She insists that this time is different.
That's why we're not going to give up for 1 second.
Elizabeth goes to a radio station and reveals that she believes he is innocent. Todd gets to listen to Elizabeth talk about
I
him.
am helping his lawyer. Todd's trial was a complete travesty.
After a while, the guard hands him an envelope revealing that his execution date has been set for February 17th. Elizabeth tells Todd about a new fire expert she finds that will help them in the case. But Todd grows frustrated about the whole thing because his date has been set and he thinks it doesn't matter what they will find, because he will soon be facing the reality.
I am here to die.
Todd reveals his regrets to Elizabeth. He wasn't able to save his kids because when he got to their room, he knew they were already dead, so he ran out of there.
I already knew that they were.
Elizabeth tries to convince Todd's wife Stacy to visit him and even help him by testifying in his favor. Stacy refuses to do it because of her brother, who convinced her that if Todd gets off, they will arrest her instead of him and that he will help them do it. A new fire scientist analyzes the case and finds that the methods used in the original investigation were outdated and incorrect. They concluded the fire was likely accidental.
Nothing?
Exactly. No burn signature.
With his execution date approaching, Todd's lawyer and legal advocates petitioned Texas Governor Rick Perry to reconsider the case based on the new forensic findings. Despite the new expert reports, the governor refuses to grant a stay of execution, sealing Todd's fate. The system moved slowly and time was running out. Appeals were denied, and despite overwhelming evidence that Todd's conviction was based on junk science, his execution date remains unchanged. Todd's wife finally comes to visit him after all these years. But their interaction doesn't go well as Todd is angry at Stacy for not visiting him all this time.
12 years it's taken you to pluck up the courage to come see me.
As Todd is about to ask Stacy to defend him one last time, Stacy refuses and flees the scene.
Just this one thing, please.
It is time to move Todd close to the chambers. Todd is starting to lose all hope with only 5 days left. And once they move the prisoners close to the chambers and get to request any food they want, it is time for execution. Todd's cellmate sees Todd on TV and feels guilty about what happened. He decides to write a letter claiming he was forced to testify against Todd by the district attorney's office and other officials.
I was forced to testify against Mr. Willingham.
He now recants his testimony against Todd. The prosecutor in Todd's case reads the letter and hides it. With 2 days left until Todd's execution, Stacy has news stations and reporters in front of her home waiting for her to give them her opinion about Todd's case, whether or not she believes he did it. Stacy's grandmother tells Stacy not to say a word to the reporters and to let her brother do all the talking. Stacy's brother reveals to the press that Todd has confessed to Stacy about killing his 3 daughters while she came to visit him in prison, and that he is guilty. Elizabeth gives Todd a visit, and with all the things that have been said and the refusal from the governor, Todd tells Elizabeth that he is scared now and not about dying, but about the pain of the injection he will receive. Todd asks Elizabeth if she is going to be there in his final moments, and Elizabeth promises to be on his side when they do it.
You're gonna be there, right?
Elizabeth goes home troubled about what is going to happen to Todd. The evidence clearly shows that he is innocent, but the state is refusing to give him his right to prove himself innocent. Elizabeth breaks down in tears, feeling sad about the ugliness of the world her kids have to witness.
But you had to learn such a shitty truth about the world.
Todd waits for his final hours while Elizabeth is on the phone trying to get the governor to read Todd's case while driving to see Todd for the last time. Unfortunately, she gets into a devastating car crash. Todd expects a phone call from Elizabeth with less than 2 hours to his execution, but he is told no one has called for him. Even the prison guard is frustrated about Todd's situation. Elizabeth gets to a hospital. She is thankfully alive, but her neck is broken. It is unlikely that she will ever be able to walk again. Her children tremble in shock at the news. Elizabeth is inside the hospital bed, devastated about not being able to be there for Todd in his final moments like she promised.
Come on now, get up.
Todd writes a letter to Elizabeth after he figures out that she hasn't shown up. The guards come to his cell to escort him to the death chamber. He initially tries to fight them off by sticking to the floor so they won't take him, but he finally gives in. Some people came to support Todd in his final moments, including his ex-wife, but Todd isn't really glad his ex-wife showed up and asks for her to be removed.
I hope you rot in hell, you.
The guard tells him they aren't able to do that. Todd curses her out for her betrayal. In his final words, Todd once again tells the people he is an innocent man, convicted of a heinous crime that he did not commit. He has been prosecuted for 12 years despite maintaining his innocence and was denied his right to appeal. As his last dying wish, he requests that his body be cremated and that his ashes be spread across his daughter's grave. Todd is finally given the dose of a lethal injection through his bloodstream. He struggles for a bit and eventually meets his fate. The movie ends with a touching scene of Elizabeth reading Todd's last letter. It brings the story full circle. Elizabeth reads one of Todd's letters, remembering his resilience while his life was taken. His words and his story will live on. He also wrote that he had a dream where he was having a walk with his girls, and Elizabeth was also there in his dream. Elizabeth fulfills Todd's last wishes along with her children by spreading his ashes on his daughter's grave. Elizabeth has a bittersweet moment. Although she tried her best to help Todd, she wasn't able to save him. Todd expresses his infinite gratitude for the kindness Elizabeth showed him.
You showed me that love is always there if you just open yourself to it.